Here's a situation that, on paper, should be totally impossible. Out of nowhere, the U.S. housing market has just recorded its lowest transaction count since 1995. That means fewer homes are changing hands right now than at any point in the last 3 decades, and at the exact same time, home prices are hovering near record highs. So let's be clear, fewer purchases, steeper prices, in any well-functioning market. Those two forces cancel each other out. That's the basic law of supply and demand taught in 8th grade. And I sat through it too. And yet, here we stand. The market is locked up, prices are through the roof, and the average first-time home buyer is now 40 years old. If you've tried to buy a place recently, you've already sensed that something is deeply, structurally wrong. You just can't quite put your finger on what. My name is Gen Z Invest, and today we're going to do something the real estate industry, the mortgage world, and most financial outlets would genuinely rather you avoid. We're going to break down exactly how this market got here, every domino and sequence with the actual numbers, so that when you make your next move, you do it with your eyes wide open. Hit subscribe if you want to keep running the real math. Let's dive in. Right now, the median price for an existing home sits at about $418,000. 7 years ago, in 2019, that figure was $272,000. That's a 46% leap. And we're not talking about Manhattan or Palo Alto. This is the national median, the dead center of the entire country. Mortgage rates are hovering around 65%, which sounds almost reasonable until you remember that back in January 2021, you could lock in a 30-year fixed mortgage for 265%. That's a completely different financial universe. Let's translate that gap into real dollars. Take the same $400,000 house, put 20% down, finance $320,000. At 265%, your monthly payment comes to $1,293. At today's 65%, that identical loan costs $2,023 per month. That's an extra $730 every single month, for 30 years for the exact same house. Same carpet, same school district that gets a generous 6 out of 10 on a good day, same postage stamp-sized yard. And oh, by the way, the house itself now costs $146,000 more than it did just 6 years ago, so you're paying more for the loan and more for the property, simultaneously. This isn't bad luck, it's the direct result of a very specific chain of decisions and shocks that piled up over half a decade. And once you understand that chain, the current situation stops feeling like chaos and starts feeling like a near inevitable conclusion. Rewind to 2020, the world is on fire, mostly metaphorically, and the Federal Reserve, in a full-blown emergency panic, slashes rates to effectively zero and starts scooping up $120 billion in bonds and mortgage-backed securities every single month. They're injecting cash into the financial system with the enthusiasm of someone who started a bonfire and is now mildly concerned they used too much lighter fluid. By January 2021, the 30-year fixed mortgage hits 265%, the lowest level Freddie Mac has recorded since 1971. People who'd been sitting on the fence suddenly realized they could afford a dramatically larger house for the same monthly payment. So they bought, and bought, and bought some more. But that was only half the story. COVID completely rewired what Americans needed from their homes overnight. Your apartment became your office, your gym, your kid's school, your restaurant, and your main source of human contact. A 700-square-foot city place that used to feel fine suddenly felt like a sensory deprivation tank with a Wi-Fi password. Remote work exploded from under 6% to over 18% almost instantly, and millions of people started asking a very logical question: if I can work from anywhere, why am I paying $2,800 a month to live somewhere I don't even like? So they left. Manhattan shed 200,000 households, San Francisco, Chicago, and Los Angeles each lost tens of thousands, and all of them poured into Austin, Phoenix, Boise, Nashville, Tampa, places with already tight inventory that suddenly faced a stampede of buyers armed with pre-approvals, pandemic savings, and a desperate need for a home office that wasn't also a closet. National home prices shot up 37% between March 2020 and March 2020 to not over a decade. But in 2 years, Austin climbed 61%, Phoenix 59%, Boise up 53% at the peak. Nearly 6,000 homes sold for $100,000 or more above the asking price in a single month. For a normal house where someone was going to do normal things like cook dinner and argue over whose turn it is to take out the trash. If you bought in 2020 or 2021, you probably made one of the best financial decisions of your life almost entirely by accident. That's not skill, that's timing. And for everyone who wasn't in a position to buy during that window, what came next made everything dramatically worse. By mid-2022, inflation was running at 91%, the highest in 40 years. So the Fed did what central banks do, they raised rates with historic aggression, 11 hikes in 16 months, from 25% to 550%. The fastest tightening cycle in for decades. Mortgage rates followed in the worst possible direction. January 2020 to 322%. October 2020 to 708%. October to $1,023,779%, the highest since 2000. 779% on the same houses people had been paying $100,000 over asking for just 18 months earlier. At 779%, that $320,000 mortgage now costs $2,302 a month versus $1,293 at the pandemic low. That's more than $1,000 extra per month, $363,000 more over the life of the loan for the exact same house. Buy the median priced home at today's 65%. You need to earn roughly $106,000 a year just to qualify. The median household income is $83,700. The average American family falls $22,000 per year short of qualifying for the average house. And every single quarter-point rate hike prices roughly 1 point per million additional buyers out of the market entirely, not fewer buyers, but gone. Home sales fell from 612 million in 2021 to just over 4 million in 2025, marking the slowest 3-year stretch the market has seen since the mid-1990s. We are selling fewer homes today in a country with 100 million more people than in 1995 than we sold back then. But here's the part that should break your brain: prices didn't fall. The median price hit $407,500 in 2020 for a record we've essentially been stuck on ever since. Demand collapsed, and supply collapsed at exactly the same moment. And that created something the modern housing market had never quite witnessed before: a total deep freeze. To understand why, you need to understand the thing that is quietly holding this entire market hostage. Right now, about 51% of all outstanding U.S. mortgages carry a rate below 4%. Roughly 20% carry a rate below 3%. If you bought in 2020 or 2021 and locked into 175%, you are sitting on a financial instrument that no longer exists. The bank won't recreate it. The market can't offer it. It's gone like a limited edition sneaker that sold out and never got restocked. So if you sell your house and buy another one today, you're not just moving. You're voluntarily surrendering the cheapest money you will almost certainly ever access in your lifetime and replacing it with money that costs more than twice as much. On a $400,000 mortgage, that swap costs an extra $730 more per month. Every month, forever. That's $87,600 over a decade just in interest for having the audacity to want to live somewhere different. Federal Reserve researchers put the average lock-in cost, the pure financial penalty of trading your old mortgage for a new one, at over $65,000. $65,000 just to leave. So the rational homeowner stays put, and the house that's too small. In the nursery that's become a Zoom background. In the neighborhood where they stopped knowing their neighbors 3 years ago, not because they want to stay, but because a spreadsheet is physically keeping them there. The Atlanta Fed found this effect lowers the probability that any homeowner lists their home by 21 to 23%. FHFA researchers estimated it has suppressed 1.7 million transactions that would otherwise have happened. Active inventory is still 17% below 2019 levels. Months of supply hovers between 33 and 38. You need 6 for a balanced market. The market isn't broken in the sense that it's collapsing. It's broken in the sense that it has completely seized up, like a door that won't open or close, just stuck, vibrating slightly, going nowhere. And if you want to understand who's actually getting squeezed hardest, let's talk about someone specific. Let's call her Maya. She's 31, works in healthcare administration in a normal mid-sized city. Makes $74,000 a year above the national median, no credit card debt, a 760 credit score, $31,000 saved over 3 years of genuine sacrifice, skipped vacations, no new car, one roommate longer than she wanted. By any reasonable standard, Maya is exactly the kind of person homeownership was designed for. Here's what the market offers her in return. The median home in her city is $385,000, with 10% down. Her loan is $346,500, at 65%. Her monthly principal and interest is $2,190, at property taxes at $350, insurance at $150. Maintenance reserve at $320, total monthly cost $3,010. Maya takes home about $4,650 a month. Housing would eat 65% of it. She'd have $1,640 left for food, transportation, health insurance, utilities, student loans, and the occasional reminder that she's a human being with a social life. She cannot afford this house, not because she's irresponsible, but because the income required to comfortably buy the median home in her market is $110,000 and she makes $74,000. The gap isn't a personal failing, it's structural. It's baked into the math. And there are millions of Mayas out there, financially solid people being told by every cultural signal around them that they should own a home by now, while being quietly excluded by numbers that never show up in those signals. Here's what that actually feels like. It doesn't feel like a crisis. It feels like opening Zillow for the 16th time this week and saving a house you know you can't afford just to have somewhere to put the feeling. It feels like watching your rent go up $150 in March and realizing your down payment timeline just got 3 months longer for a deposit you've been building for 3 years. It feels like going to your best friend's housewarming, genuinely happy for them, while involuntarily calculating what their monthly payment must be. It feels like being responsible by virtually every measure and still being systematically kept out of the thing your parents treated as a basic expectation of adulthood. First-time buyers now make up just 21% of all purchases, a record low in 44 years of tracking. The historical norm is 40%. The median age of a first-time buyer is now 40. In the early 1990s, it was 28. Buying at 40 instead of 30 costs roughly $150,000 in lost lifetime equity from the decade of appreciation you missed. Baby boomers now make up 42% of all buyers. Half of older boomers are buying entirely in cash. They sold a house they bought for $200,000 in 1998 that's now worth $700,000, pocketed the equity, and walked in with no mortgage dependency, while the 32-year-old is trying to win a bidding war with a pre-approval letter and $31,000 saved. The downstream result: 84% of Gen Z aspiring homeowners are delaying at least one major life milestone because of housing, 29% are postponing having children, 18% are delaying marriage, 1 in 6 aspiring buyers, and 22% of millennials have given up on homeownership entirely, not paused, given up. The median first-time buyer being 40 years old is not a quirky data point. It's the statistical fingerprint of a generation squeezed so hard and for so long that the defining marker of middle-class stability has been pushed from early adulthood into middle age. And every institution with a financial stake in you buying a home has a structural incentive to tell you that now is a great time to buy. None of them make money when you say no. Here's what almost never gets enough airtime: the shortage didn't start in 2020. It was assembled piece by piece over 15 years of underbuilding after 2008. The US is short somewhere between 3.5 and 4.5 million housing units. After the financial crisis, builders pulled back hard. For the entire 2010s, housing starts averaged about 990,000 per year against a historical baseline of 15 million. And what got built skewed heavily toward the upper end of the market because that's where the margins are. He starter home under 1,400 square feet. The traditional entry point for first-time buyers went from over 400,000 units a year in the 1970s to just 65,000 in 2020, an 80% decline. The house that was supposed to be the beginning of the wealth-building ladder for working Americans was essentially discontinued as a product. Then came the pandemic surge, then the rate spike, and now tariffs, steel up 50%, aluminum up 50%, Canadian lumber up 45% combined, adding an estimated $10,000 to $17,500 to the cost of every new home. The supply chain looked at the situation and said, "Cool problem, not our department." Builders are fighting back with incentives and rate buy-downs to 45% or lower. But the hard truth is this: the supply problem took a decade to create. Will take at least a decade to meaningfully solve. There is no policy lever anyone can pull that builds 4 million homes into years at some point in every housing market conversation. Someone says it is this 2008. No, not even close, and the reasons it's different matter enormously. In 2006 and 2007, subprime mortgages made up 18 to 21% of all originations, liar loans, interest-only products. Negative amortization mortgages, mainstream products. The banking system was betting on home prices rising forever, using money borrowed against itself with zero margin for error. Today, subprime lending is roughly 36 to 40% of originations. The median credit score at origination is 758, 50 points higher than in 2006. And here's the most important number: in 2009, 26% of all mortgage properties were underwater, the condition that triggers mass defaults, foreclosures, and a genuine price spiral. Today, just 22% are underwater. Homeowners are sitting on $358 trillion in collective equity. Foreclosures in 2020 for total 174,100. In 2008, they hit 23 million. The 2008 crisis happened because banks lent money to people who couldn't repay it, based on home values they largely invented. Today, the problem is almost the inverse: the lending is sound, the borrowers are qualified, the equity is real, and you still can't afford anything. Progress. Technically, this is not a fragile market. It's a frozen, structurally constrained, deeply expensive market. A crash at least creates buying opportunities. A frozen market that slowly grinds sideways mostly just continues to exist, absorbing more of people's income and waiting for time to do what policy can't. The thing everyone's waiting for is a significant drop in mortgage rates. It would genuinely help. Most forecasts have rates ending this year between 57 and 61% better. But a Bankrate survey found that 37% of homeowners need rates below 5% before they'd even consider selling. That threshold isn't where we're headed this year. The lock-in effect fades naturally over time. People have kids, take new jobs, get divorced, retire. The share of mortgages below 4% has already dropped from its peak of 65% down to about 48% today. That slow release is the most realistic path to a more functional market. But slow is the operative word. This is a 5 to 10-year process. Now here's the twist: almost nobody's talking about a dramatic rate drop might not fix affordability. It could temporarily make it worse. Think about it, millions of buyers are sitting on the sidelines right now. If rates drop to 5% quickly, that wave of pent-up demand floods back overnight. But supply doesn't recover overnight. The 35 million unit deficit took a decade to create. So what happens when massive demand hits insufficient supply? Prices spike. The same dynamic that drove the 2020 to 2022 surge could partially repeat at a higher base level. The cure, if it arrives too fast, could temporarily make the disease worse before it makes it better. The most honest forecast is that, barring one a slow, multi-year correction where prices move roughly sideways while incomes gradually rise. No crash, no dramatic relief, just time and grinding adjustment. with a lot of difficult personal decisions in the middle. If you're in your late 20s or 30s right now, you are navigating the most dysfunctional housing market any generation has faced since World War II. Not the most dramatic. 2008 was more dramatic but more insidious, because this one doesn't feel like a crisis, it feels like a permanent new normal. And every institution with a financial stake in your decision has a structural incentive to tell you otherwise. Your frustration is legitimate. The income required to buy the median home is $106,000. The median household income is $83,700. The system has a $22,000 gap baked in before you even show up. You are not failing at adulthood. The math is just broken. The decision to buy has to be based on your real numbers, not the market's narrative. If total monthly housing costs land below 28 to 30% of your gross income and you plan to stay at least 7 years, buying makes sense. If the math doesn't work at that threshold, it doesn't work. Stretching to 45% of your income because your real estate agent says it's a great time doesn't make it a great time. It makes you a future statistic. Renting and investing the difference is a completely legitimate strategy that almost nobody with a financial incentive will suggest, because nobody earns a commission when you put money in an index fund. In a high-rate, high-price environment, the math can absolutely compete with or outperform buying an overpriced house. This is not a consolation prize if you are buying. Look seriously at new construction. Builder rate buy-downs at 4.5 to 5% are real, and the median new home price is essentially at parity with existing homes, something that almost never happens. Just make sure the incentives aren't disguising an inflated base price. Run every number. The housing market you're dealing with is the product of 30 months of the cheapest money in American history, followed by the fastest rate hike cycle in 40 years. Layered on top of a decade of underbuilding that left the country 4 million homes short. The people who need prices to fall are priced out of buying even if they do fall. The people who need to sell are financially trapped by the very low rates that made housing affordable 5 years ago. Everyone is stuck at opposite ends of the same problem for completely opposite reasons, and there is no product, no policy, no executive order, and no rate cut that fixes a structural imbalance this large in a single year. The era of buying any house at any price and assuming appreciation will bail you out is over. Running the real numbers before you sign is not pessimism. It's the only sane way to navigate a market this expensive and this broken. You're not crazy for looking at listings and thinking none of this adds up. It genuinely doesn't. And understanding exactly why it doesn't, that's the first step toward making a decision that actually works for you. Instead of just participating in collective financial insanity because everyone around you insists that buying is always the right move, now you know. Drop a like if this helped, it genuinely makes a difference. Subscribe if you want to keep running the real math together, and I'll see you in the next one.